This is a man with deep understanding of both East and West, a global economic historian who thinks way outside the box, a lover of peace who is unafraid to speak warrior words. Please welcome Sensei Benchen. Hello, are you there?
Yeah.
Hi. And
I
also...
after this introduction, I'm not sure what to say, but I guess what the most important thing I have to say is that by living in Asia, I was able to understand that the United States is a slave society, and that the American people did not realize this, and nor did I. But to a lesser extent, Europe is also a slave society, but what you had about 2% of your population, maybe 1%, in on a kind of scam to treat the other 99% like sheep. Take their money, kill them, manipulate them, use them, and despise them. And what's happening is that people are starting to figure this out, and they're getting very angry. And the way they controlled people was through the control of money. They took over the ability to make money from your government back in 1913, and then they proceeded to use a combination of bribes, murder, blackmail, whatever it took to take over your textbook publishing industry, your newspapers, your television, your music, your movies, everything, and brainwash you. And they did this out of sheer greed. And what happened is that the whole thing has blown up in their faces. These people are now terrified. They don't know what's going to happen. They know that things have reached the point of no return, that people are not going to go back to sleep. They're not going to be able to lull them back into, passive silence again. There was a semi-revolt against them after the Vietnam War, known as the hippie movement, and it resulted in a bunch of books about the CIA and a bunch of hearings in the government, and then people thought they dealt with the problem, and they all went back to sleep, but these people just came back, and they pulled off 9/11 and set up a Nazi fascist government, and they were planning to kill 4 billion people and enslave the rest of humanity and set themselves up as slave masters of our planet forever. I know it's an incredible story. It's just so horrific that the mind is kind of reels and says, no, it can't be, it can't be. But the evidence is overwhelming. If you check the facts, if you do the research, you find out it has to be true. There's no other explanation. And these people hid themselves behind a Jewish mask. They're not Jews, okay? They worship Satan. But I would say maybe of the 6.5 million American Jews, 1 million of them are not actually Jews, but are actually Satan worshippers. And this is the source of the problem. A lot of them, by the way, pretend to be Christian or whatever. They don't just pretend to be Jews. They hide themselves behind many different masks. But the point is that these people really do worship Satan. And I actually visited their headquarters in Italy and talked to some of their leaders. And the story they had to tell me was just so, truth is stranger than fiction, I guess is what I have to say. But what they're telling me is that they've been ruling large parts of humanity for thousands of years, according to a plot.
Benjamin. This is Ash Nandoa, and we want to also know about your history, and you have quite an in-depth knowledge on the financial system from your previous work. I'm going to bring in Raisa, who is the co-creator of the Gold Ring, and we want to sort of get your timeline in, and then go into that, if that's all right with you.
Sure. my family my great-grandfather was the largest shareholder in General Electric, and I'm pretty sure he was killed by John Rockefeller I. The stocks were taken away from the family. And this has happened to an awful lot of families since the beginning of the Fed and stuff. In other words, a lot of the people who actually built America's industry then had it taken away from them unfairly by these people who own the money machine. So we're now in the process of going through an audit, as I said, and it may well be that all the stuff they've stolen is going to have to be given back. But anyway, going back, the point is that I knew that there was something horrible had happened. I wasn't sure what it was, but also as a child, I grew up in Mexico, and I learned about the horrific things the Spaniards did to the Aztecs. So I didn't have to, and I also had the bizarre experience of studying the Mexican-American War according to the American high school, or the American grade school textbooks and the Mexican grade school textbooks. And the story was so different, I didn't realize for a long time they were talking about the same war. So from a very young age, I didn't trust the people in charge. I felt, okay, there's some evil people in charge. And when I was a teenager, I decided that I did not want to go to university because I would be brainwashed and turned into a consumer. This is the sort of sweet talk I picked up. Hold on a second. So I decided to leave civilization. And I ended up in the Amazon with the Shipibo Indians near Pucallpa, Peru. This is where the road ends and the Amazon begins. And there I had an experience very similar, in fact, to that movie Avatar. That is to say, there was you could see this was the front line of civilization, the borderline, and there was a community of, it looked like an American middle-class suburb plonked down there in the middle of this town. It had shanty towns and everything else. And these people, their job was to translate the Bible into every language on earth. And so what they would do is they'd fly these airplanes over the Amazon looking for undiscovered tribes, and they would drop down bags of stuff like cooking utensils and mirrors and useful things. And the first times the plane would fly over, these natives would shoot arrows and stuff at them. But then they realized that they're not hostile. They would eventually, the other thing they did was they put microphones in with the stuff they dropped so they could figure out the language. And eventually they would land and introduce themselves. And sometimes even then they were killed. But the point was that they were trying to convert them to Christianity. And they didn't really want to be converted. When I realized that it seemed strange that they would have to, that it was these fundamentalist Christians who were people introducing them to civilization. But I now realize that this was not really a Christian thing. This was being financed by the oil companies and the other big corporations because they wanted to create a slave race there. They wanted to enslave these people.